Hey, welcome back to the Nero world. Today we're diving into another Nero Wolfe mystery, smart, sharp, and worth every minute. The trouble with beautiful women is that they know they're beautiful, and they use it the way a carpenter uses a hammer, deliberately, with full knowledge of the effect. The woman who walked into Nero Wolfe's office at 10:30 on a Tuesday morning in November was no exception. She wore a crimson wool coat that probably cost more than my monthly salary, carried a leather handbag that certainly did, and moved across the threshold with the measured confidence of someone who had never once doubted that a room would rearrange itself around her arrival. I was at my desk, going through the morning mail, mostly bills, 2 requests from insurance companies for background checks, and a letter from a man in Tulsa who believed his neighbor was poisoning his roses and wanted Wolfe to prove it, when Fritz showed her in. I stood up. I always stand up. Wolfe thinks it's a sentimental reflex. I think it's good policy. "Miss Vivienne Caro," Fritz announced, with the small, correct bow he reserves for women he finds impressive. She was impressive. Mid-30s, dark hair pinned with geometric precision, eyes the color of good bourbon, and a mouth that seemed to be deciding at every moment whether to smile or say something devastating. She chose neither, immediately, and simply looked at me. "Mr. Goodwin," she said. It wasn't a question. "That's right. Please sit down, Miss Caro." I gestured to the red leather chair across from Wolfe's desk, the one we call the client's chair, though Wolfe says it's just a chair, and sentiment is for people with nothing better to do. "Mr. Wolfe will be down at 11. He's with his orchids." She sat with the economy of movement that comes from years of being watched. "I was told he keeps unusual hours." "He keeps perfect hours," I said, returning to my desk. "They just don't match anyone else's. Can I get you something while you wait?" "Fritz makes exceptional coffee." "Nothing, thank you." She set her handbag on her knee and looked around the office, the bookshelves running floor to ceiling on the south wall, the globe in the corner that Wolfe spins when he's thinking, the 2-ton desk of polished ebony, the abundance of yellow and orange in the floral arrangements Fritz refreshed every other day. He really lives like this. He does. Has for 30 years. The orchids are upstairs, in case you were wondering about the setup. 10,000 of them, give or take. He goes up at 9 and comes down at 11, then up again at 4, down at 6. In between, he solves murders and drinks beer. She turned those bourbon eyes on me. And which is he better at? I considered it honestly. Probably the beer, but only because he gets more practice. She almost smiled. Not quite. At 11 o'clock, with the punctuality of a man who considers tardiness a moral failing, Nero Wolfe came through the door. He is not a man who enters rooms so much as he occupies them. 6 feet, 1/7 of a ton, his own preferred accounting of his weight, moving with the careful deliberateness of someone who has made peace with gravity, and insists gravity make peace in return. He wore his usual dark suit, his face arranged in the expression that might be called neutral if neutral had opinions. He crossed to his chair behind the desk, lowered himself into it. The chair was custom-built, reinforced, a minor feat of engineering, and looked at Vivienne Caro with the focused attention he gives to a new orchid hybrid, or a particularly good plate of quenelles. "Miss Caro." He did not say good morning. He rarely bothered with pleasantries he considered ceremonial. "You wish to engage my services. Tell me why, and tell me everything that is relevant. Archie will take notes." I had my notebook open already. She glanced at me, then back at Wolfe. "My brother is going to be charged with murder," she said, "possibly by the end of the week. I want you to prove he didn't do it." "Who was killed?" "A man named Desmond Hale. He was found dead in his office on Monday morning, yesterday, at approximately 7:45. He'd been struck on the head with a marble bookend. The police believe my brother, Marcus Caro, is responsible." She paused. "They may arrest him today." Wolfe's eyes were half closed, which meant he was listening at full capacity. "Your evidence that he is innocent." He told me he didn't do it. That, Wolfe said, is not evidence. That is testimony, and it is the least reliable variety. What is your evidence? She didn't flinch. I know, my brother. We are not a sentimental family, Mr. Wolfe. We don't make extravagant claims for one another. If Marcus told me he didn't kill Desmond Hale, he didn't kill Desmond Hale. Why do the police suspect him? Because he was there. She uncrossed and recrossed her legs with perfect composure. Marcus arrived at Hale's office building at 6:15 in the morning. He's confirmed this himself to the police, which I consider either brave or foolish. He says he went to speak with Hale about a business matter and found the building locked. He waited in the lobby for approximately 20 minutes, was told by the building's overnight attendant that Mr. Hale hadn't come in yet, and left. Hale's body was found 90 minutes later. Cause of death was a blow to the right temple. Time of death, the medical examiner places between 5 and 7 in the morning. So Marcus Caro was in the building during the window of death, I said. Did the overnight attendant actually see him come in and wait, or just come in? She looked at me with a slight upward adjustment of her expression. Reassessment, I thought, not displeasure. He saw him arrive and wait. Marcus could have taken the elevator. Wolfe asked, "The elevator to what floor?" Hale's office was on the 14th floor. The building has an attendant elevator that requires the operator to take you up during off hours. But there's a self-service elevator as well. The attendant was at the desk in the lobby. He can confirm Marcus was in the lobby. He cannot confirm Marcus didn't leave the lobby between his arrival and departure. Wolfe was silent for a moment. Outside, a November wind pushed against the brownstone's windows with polite insistence. "Who is Desmond Hale?" Wolfe asked. "And what was the nature of his relationship with your brother?" The question produced the first crack in Vivienne Caro's composure. It was a small one, a half-second pause, the faintest adjustment around the eyes. But I'd been watching carefully, because that's what I'm paid to do, and I caught it. Desmond Hale was a financial manager. He ran an investment firm, Hale Capital Partners, on East 53rd Street. My brother was one of his clients. So was I at one point. At one point, Wolfe echoed. You are no longer a client? I withdrew my investments from his firm 14 months ago. Why? Another pause, shorter, better controlled. I had concerns about the performance of my portfolio. Miss Caro. Wolfe's voice was not unkind, but it was firm. I am not the police. I am not the press. I am a private detective whom you are asking to prevent your brother's murder conviction. If you withhold information from me, I cannot help him. If I later discover that you have withheld information, I will be angry, which is unpleasant for everyone in this house, and I will almost certainly decline to continue. So I ask you again, with some emphasis, why did you withdraw your investments? Vivienne Caro looked at Nero Wolfe for a long moment. Whatever she saw there, and there is, I'll admit, a great deal to see, not all of it comfortable, she made a decision. Because I believed Desmond Hale was stealing from his clients, she said, including my brother. The office was quiet. I wrote it down. How much? Wolfe asked. In Marcus's case, somewhere between $400,000 and $600,000, taken over a period of approximately 3 years through a series of fictitious investment fees and what appeared to be misallocated returns. In my own case, considerably less. I caught the discrepancy earlier and was therefore less exposed. Did you or your brother bring this to anyone's attention? Regulators, attorneys, the police? Marcus confronted Hale directly, approximately 3 weeks ago. There was a meeting in Hale's office. It did not go well. Archie, Wolfe said. Writing, I confirmed. Were others similarly defrauded? Wolfe asked. We believe so. Hale had approximately 60 clients. We've spoken informally with 2 others who share our suspicions. Wolfe pressed his fingertips together and regarded the ceiling with the expression of a man reading a text only he can see. The police, he said, know about the money. They know Marcus accused Hale of taking it. Whether they verified the amounts or fully grasped the mechanism, I don't know. They know about the meeting 3 weeks ago. Yes. They know about your brother's presence in the building yesterday morning. Yes. And they know the victim was struck with a blunt object during a window of time in which your brother has no verified alibi, beyond a lobby attendant who can account for his location, intermittently, at best. Yes, she said quietly. Wolfe lowered his gaze from the ceiling to Vivian Caro. It is a straightforward case from their perspective. A man was defrauded. He confronted his defrauder. The defrauder was subsequently killed, and the defrauded man was in the building. Yes. What is your brother's alibi, for the remainder of the morning? Before 6:15, I mean. He was home, alone. His wife is visiting her sister in Philadelphia. I stopped writing for a beat, then started again. No alibi before the attendant. No alibi for the elevator. And apparently, a very compelling motive wrapped in $400,000 to $600,000. I'd seen men convicted on less. Wolfe put his hands on the desk. My fee is substantial. I require a retainer of $10,000, which will be applied against total costs. If the case resolves without significant investigative effort, I will return the difference. If it requires more, and I suspect it will, we discuss further arrangements. Vivian Caro opened her handbag and produced a checkbook with the promptness of someone who had already written the figure in her head on the way over. She wrote the check without apparent discomfort, set it on the edge of Wolfe's desk, and snapped the book shut. Mr. Wolfe, she said, standing, I want you to understand something. My brother is not a gentle man. He can be difficult, impatient, and occasionally reckless with his words. He is not the sort of person who inspires automatic sympathy. When the police look at him, they see someone easy to suspect. She picked up her handbag. I'm not asking you to like him. I'm asking you to find the truth. Wolfe took the check without looking at it and set it to one side. I never like anyone, Miss Caro. It would compromise my judgment considerably. Archie will show you out and obtain any remaining details he needs. She nodded once, precisely, and turned toward the door. I followed her to the hallway, got her address, her brother's address, the name and address of the building on East 53rd, and the names of the 2 other clients who shared her suspicions about Hale's practices. At the front door she paused, hand on the frame, and looked back at me. Do you think he can actually do it? She asked, not plaintive, genuinely curious, the kind of question someone asks when they've spent weeks running calculations and can't quite trust the final number. I've seen him do things that would make a logician weep, I said honestly. Is your brother didn't do it? Wolfe will find who did. If he did do it, he didn't. Then we're in business, I said. She left. I watched the crimson coat disappear down the brownstone steps and onto West 35th Street, then went back to the office, where Nero Wolfe had already opened his current book, a dense Romanian novel he was reading in the original, and appeared to have left the planet entirely. Well, I said, settling into my chair, 400,000 to 600,000 in stolen money, no alibi, a dead body, and a very composed woman writing very large checks. What do you want me to do first? Wolfe turned a page. Find out everything there is to know about Desmond Hale, he said, without looking up. A man's enemies are the biography he doesn't choose to write himself. I reached for the phone. Outside, the November wind was picking up. It was, I thought, going to be a complicated week. Desmond Hale I discovered over the next several hours through a combination of phone calls, a visit to the offices of a financial journalist I'd cultivated over the years, and one extended search through back issues of financial trade publications, had been precisely the kind of man who looks impressive in photographs and less so in person. He'd founded Hale Capital Partners 11 years ago, after a decade at a white shoe investment firm on Park Avenue, where he distinguished himself, according to my journalist contact, by being ruthlessly charming and knowing exactly whose calls to return. The firm managed assets for roughly 60 clients, primarily wealthy individuals and small family trusts, with a particular focus on what the prospectus described as bespoke long-term capital preservation. In plain language, that meant he told rich people he'd protect their money and charge them very well for saying so. His client list, which I couldn't access directly but could assemble from public records, press mentions, and the information Vivian Caro had given me, included a cross-section of New York's comfortably wealthy. Not the spectacular tabloid cover rich. Those people had institutional advisors and teams of lawyers. Hale's clients were the invisibly wealthy, real estate heirs, retired executives, the founders of medium-sized businesses who'd sold at the right moment. People with enough money to want protection and not quite enough institutional sophistication to question how that protection worked. By 3 o'clock, I had a working picture. By 4, when Wolfe disappeared upstairs for his afternoon orchid session, I'd narrowed down the list of key players to 7, which I wrote on the whiteboard I keep behind my desk for cases that require visual organization. At 6, when Wolfe came back down and settled in with the first beer of the evening, a Montrachet he'd recently discovered and defended with the passion most people reserve for family, I presented my findings. Desmond Hale, I began, reading from my notes. Age 51. Born in Hartford, Connecticut. Graduated Yale, then Wharton. Married, no children. Wife is named Patricia. Patricia Hale, née Sloan. She's in her mid-40s, originally from Connecticut money, not spectacularly wealthy in her own right, but comfortable. Married to Hale for 16 years. By all accounts, a conventional marriage. Public appearances, no scandals, not particularly close. Wolfe said, that last observation, Wolfe said, is not relevant as stated. Reframe it. Fair. They had a marriage that looked fine from the outside and hasn't generated any public drama. Whether it looked fine from the inside is something we'd need to investigate. I moved on. Hale lived in a townhouse on East 68th. He had a weekend place in Westchester. Spent money deliberately, but not flashily. Good wine, a standing reservation at 2 or 3 serious restaurants. That kind of thing. By all appearances, successful. My financial journalist friend, who has been sniffing around the investment industry for 15 years, tells me there have been whispers about Hale for roughly 18 months. Nothing actionable, nothing public. Just the kind of quiet conversations that happen when someone's numbers don't add up and enough people notice. Wolfe drank his beer with the attention it deserved. Who are the other clients who share the Caro suspicions? I talked to both of them this afternoon. I checked my notes. First is a man named Gerald Fenn, 63 years old, retired, sold a chain of medical equipment supply companies about 8 years ago and invested a chunk of the proceeds with Hale. He's been a client for 6 years. He lives on West End Avenue. I spoke to him on the phone. He's cautious, but angry. Agreed to come in tomorrow morning to speak with you. And the second? A woman named Renata Voss, 58, former art dealer. She's had money with Hale for 4 years. She was less cautious and more directly furious. Talked to me for 45 minutes without being asked. She's found what she believes are clear discrepancies in her quarterly statements, and she's been trying to get a straight answer from Hale's office for 6 months. She'll come in tomorrow as well. Wolfe nodded fractionally. And Marcus Caro. Have you spoken with him? Spoke to him at 2 o'clock. He came to the phone sounding like a man who hasn't slept and is refusing to admit it. I leaned back in my chair. He's 41, 2 years younger than his sister. He runs an import business, fine textiles, primarily from Italy and Portugal. Successful, but not spectacular. He invested with Hale 7 years ago, starting with $800,000 and adding to it over time. His total investment reached just over $2 million at its peak. Wolfe raised an eyebrow, fractionally, which for Wolfe is equivalent to most people's gasp. He built it up over time, I said. He trusted Hale. Apparently Hale was good at being trusted. I paused. He confirmed everything his sister told you. Confronted Hale 3 weeks ago, face to face, in Hale's office. Meeting lasted 25 minutes. Hale denied everything, suggested the discrepancies were the result of market conditions and Marcus's own misreading of the statements. Marcus told him, and I'm quoting here, that he'd see him destroyed before he let him walk away with that money. Did he say that to the police? He did not volunteer it, but someone apparently did. The police know about it. It's been characterized as a threat. Wolfe looked at his glass. It is a threat. Yes, I said. It is. What is his explanation for his presence at the building at 6:15 in the morning? He says he couldn't sleep. He'd been thinking about Hale for weeks. The confrontation hadn't resolved anything, and he'd retained an attorney who was moving slowly. He decided to go to the office early, catch Hale before anyone else arrived, and try once more to get a direct answer. Whether that's rational behavior or desperate behavior probably depends on how much money you've lost. And he found the building locked, spoke to the overnight attendant, was told Hale hadn't arrived, waited and left. That's his account, consistent with the attendant's account as far as it goes. Wolfe set down his glass. Is there anyone else? From the firm itself? 2 people of interest, I said. First is a man named Conrad Yates. He's been Hale's operations director for 7 years, the one who actually runs the day-to-day mechanics of the business. He knows where everything is, including the skeletons. I haven't talked to him yet. He declined to speak with me on the phone, said anything I wanted to know about Hale Capital Partners should go through the firm's legal representative, which is either professional caution or something more interesting. Or both, Wolfe said. Or both, I agreed. Second is a woman named Sylvia Rand. She's been an investment advisor at the firm for 3 years, handles several of the firm's smaller accounts. She called me. Wolfe looked up from his glass. She called you. She found out, somehow, that I was asking questions. I'd called the firm's main number at one point, spoke to a receptionist, identified myself. Sylvia Rand called my number about an hour later. She wouldn't tell me much on the phone, but she was clearly frightened and clearly wanted to talk. I paused. She said, and again I'm quoting, "There are things that need to come out about this firm. I want to help, but I need to know I'm protected first." The room was quiet, except for the small sounds the brownstone makes in winter, the radiators, the occasional complaint from the old wood of the floors. She comes here tomorrow, Wolfe said. It wasn't a suggestion. I told her 10 o'clock. And Conrad Yates? Working on it. Work harder. He reached for his book. And find out about the physical scene of the murder, the layout of the 14th floor, the building's access points, whether there's surveillance. Who else had cause to be in that office? The police will have this information. Inspector Kramer will not share it voluntarily. I know a sergeant who owes me a favor. Use it. He opened the book. We have perhaps 48 hours before the police make an arrest. That is not enough time to be deliberate. It is, however, enough time to be efficient. The next morning began at 8 o'clock, with Fritz's coffee and a list of appointments that would have daunted a social secretary. Gerald Fenn arrived first, precisely on time. A compact gray-haired man with the manner of someone who's spent a career being right and finds it exhausting. He sat in the client's chair as if he owned it, and described in organized and quietly furious detail how he'd come to suspect that roughly $200,000 of his money had been redirected into accounts he couldn't trace. I have the statements, he said, setting a folder on Wolfe's desk. The performance numbers don't match the market performance for the asset classes he claimed to be investing in. It's not subtle, once you know how to look. Have you shown these to anyone else? Wolfe asked. My accountant. And 3 weeks ago, an attorney I've retained. Not the authorities. Fenn's jaw tightened slightly. I was building a case. I wanted the evidence solid before I went to the SEC. Wolfe nodded. Did you know Marcus Caro had confronted Hale directly? I heard about it. Thought it was premature. Where were you yesterday morning, Mr. Fenn? Between 5 and 7 o'clock. Fenn looked at Wolfe with the measured expression of a man who has been expecting the question, and has decided how to receive it. Home. Asleep. My wife can confirm I was home until 8. Renata Voss arrived 20 minutes after Fenn left. She was the kind of woman who speaks the way she presumably once sold art, with authority and velocity, assuming the audience will keep up. She wore her silver hair cut short, had rings on several fingers, and a manner of compressed impatience that suggested life was chronically failing to move at her preferred pace. She confirmed the financial irregularities in her own account, with less organized documentation but considerably more color, and told us that she had 2 months ago actually confronted Hale's operations director, Conrad Yates, not Hale himself. "I went to the office and demanded a meeting," she said. "I got Yates. He stonewalled me, beautifully and infuriatingly. But I'll tell you this." She leaned forward. "He was frightened. He kept looking at the door. Whatever's going on in that firm, Conrad Yates knows exactly what it is." When she left, Wolfe sat for a long moment in the post-meeting quiet that he generates through sheer self-possession. "Well," I said, "we have frightened people, stolen money, a dead conman, and a man with no alibi who threatened the victim 11 days before his death. What's your first impression?" "That this is not a case about money," Wolfe said. I looked at my notebook, which was full of nothing but money. "Care to explain that?" "Not yet," he said. "Show in Miss Rand when she arrives." Sylvia Rand was 29 years old and frightened in the specific, careful way of someone who has decided to be frightened on their own terms. She arrived at 10 o'clock in a dark blue coat that was slightly too large for her, sat down across from Wolfe's desk, folded her hands in her lap, and said before either of us could open the conversation, "I need to know that what I tell you stays between us and is used only to help this investigation, not the press, not casually. What you tell me is privileged to the extent that I determine it serves the case," Wolfe said. "I do not volunteer information unnecessarily. I do not deal with the press. I am not in any formal sense obligated to confidentiality. What I will tell you is that I am engaged to find who killed Desmond Hale, not to tidy up the firm's reputation, not to protect anyone's interests beyond justice. If you have information that serves that purpose, you should share it." She studied him for a moment. "All right." She unfolded and refolded her hands. "I've worked at Hale Capital for 3 years. I manage client accounts, smaller portfolios mostly. I'm not involved in the main investment strategy, which is Hale and Yates together." She paused. 8 months ago, I noticed something wrong." "In your accounts?" I asked. "In one of my accounts, and then, when I started looking, in several others, fees being charged that didn't correspond to any service I recognized. Small amounts, a few $100s here, a few thousand there, but consistent, and they traced back to an account code I didn't recognize. I asked Yates about it." She stopped. "And?" Wolfe prompted. "He told me it was a legacy accounting system artifact and not to worry about it. He seemed very calm about it. Then, that afternoon, Hale called me into his office. He was also very calm. He told me that what I'd noticed was confidential, related to a compliance restructuring, and that I should not discuss it with clients or anyone outside the firm." She looked at her folded hands. "He was very pleasant about it. That was the unnerving part." "You didn't believe the explanation," Wolfe said. "The account code didn't exist in any system I had access to, and the amounts being taken corresponded, I checked carefully over time, to client portfolio values. A percentage, not fixed amounts, a percentage." She looked up. "That's not a legacy accounting artifact. That's a structure." "How much," Wolfe said, "did you take this information to anyone?" "I've been documenting it for 6 months, quietly, on my personal laptop, not a firm device. I was going to go to the SEC, but I wanted a full picture first. I was afraid. Hale was a very connected man. I knew if I made an accusation I couldn't fully substantiate, it would end my career. Does anyone else at the firm know what you found?" She hesitated. "I think Conrad Yates suspects that I know more than I've said. We've had 2 conversations in the last month where he said things that felt like testing me, checking how much I'd seen." "What kind of things?" "Once he said, out of context, that in financial services the line between aggressive fee structures and misconduct is often misunderstood by people outside the industry. Once he said that loyal employees always benefit in the long run. She said it with the exact inflection of someone recounting phrases they've memorized against their will. "Miss Rand," Wolfe said, "where were you Monday morning between 5 and 7 a.m.? "I was at home," she said, "my apartment in Brooklyn. I was there all morning. I didn't leave for work until 8:30. "Can anyone verify that?" "My neighbor's security camera covers the building entrance. I didn't leave until 8:30. "Good." Wolfe folded his hands on the desk. "Now tell me about the physical layout of the firm's offices. The 14th floor of the building on East 53rd. She straightened slightly, as if the practical question was easier to answer than the personal ones. "The floor is exclusively Hale Capital. The elevator opens into a reception area. From there, a hallway runs the length of the floor. Hale's office is at the far end, corner office east side. Yates has the office next to his, also large. The rest of us are in smaller offices along the hallway, and in an open-plan area near reception." "How is the office secured?" "The main elevator requires a key card after 6 p.m. The stairwell doors can be exited from the inside without a card, but require a card to enter from the stairwell side. So access after 6 p.m. requires a key card," I said. "Who has one?" "Everyone on staff. There are 14 of us, and Hale had extras. I don't know how many." "Do clients have access?" "No," but she stopped. "But," Wolfe said, "Hale sometimes met clients after hours, especially favored ones. He had a practice of giving a small number of major clients building access for after-hours meetings. I know of at least 2 who've used the building in the evening." I wrote that down and underlined it twice. After she left, I went across the hall to the kitchen and got myself a cup of Fritz's coffee, and stood leaning against the counter, doing the arithmetic. Here's what I had. Desmond Hale struck dead in his own office between 5 and 7 in the morning. Marcus Caro in the building during part of that window, with motive, no full alibi, and a prior threat on record. Gerald Fenn, home and asleep, with a wife, for alibi. Renata Voss, who I hadn't asked yet. Conrad Yates, refusing to talk. Sylvia Rand, with a camera-verified alibi. And 2 unnamed clients with building access codes. And a question Wolfe had planted and not yet explained. The idea that this wasn't about money. I took my coffee back to the office. Wolfe was reading. "I heard from my sergeant," I said, dropping into my chair. He came through on the scene information. Wolfe closed his book on a finger. "Building camera covers the main entrance lobby. Also the elevator bank. The recording from Monday morning shows Marcus Caro arriving at 6:14, standing in the lobby for approximately 22 minutes, and leaving at 6:37. The overnight attendance account is confirmed precisely. But here's the thing." "Yes," Wolfe said, as though he already knew what I was about to say. "The recording also shows someone else. Between 5 and 5:20 in the morning, a figure enters the building via the lobby. The camera quality is poor. It's an older system, black and white, mounted high, and the figure is wearing a hat and a coat with the collar turned up. My sergeant says the investigators can't make an identification from the footage." "Can you obtain a copy of the footage?" "Working on it." "The weapon," Wolfe said. "What do we know?" "A marble bookend, one of a pair that sat on Hale's desk. The other is still there. The murder weapon was found in a trash receptacle on the 14th floor, approximately 12 feet from Hale's office door. No fingerprints. Whoever used it, wiped it." "Which tells us what?" "That it wasn't an impulsive act. Or if it was impulsive, the person had enough presence of mind afterward to wipe the weapon and dispose of it, rather than flee immediately." "Or," Wolfe said, "that it was designed to appear premeditated while being something else entirely." He reopened his book. "I want Conrad Yates here tomorrow morning. I don't care how you arrange it." "And if he won't come?" Wolfe looked at me over the top of his book, with the expression he uses when I've asked a question he finds theoretically interesting, but practically obvious. "Everyone comes," he said, "when properly motivated. Find his motivation." I found it in 40 minutes of phone work. Conrad Yates had, 3 years ago, been the subject of a regulatory inquiry at his previous firm. A small thing, quietly resolved, but documented. A thing he would prefer, I suspected, to discuss privately with a detective rather than have discussed publicly with anyone else. I called his cell phone directly. I just told him that Nero Wolfe was gathering information relevant to the murder of his employer, and that attendance was, in the informal but functional sense, not optional. He agreed to come at 9 in the morning. I told Wolfe. "Good," he said, without looking up. "And Archie?" "Yes?" "Make arrangements to visit the building on East 53rd this afternoon. Specifically, I want to know how the overnight building attendant was positioned on Monday morning. What he could see, what he could not." I put on my coat. "Anything you want me to look for particularly?" "The thing that isn't there," Wolfe said. Which was, I reflected, exactly the kind of answer that keeps this job from being boring. By the time I got back from East 53rd Street, it was nearly 6 o'clock, and Wolfe was in the kitchen with Fritz, engaged in a forensic discussion about whether a particular French technique for preparing sole was being undermined by the quality of local cream. I waited in the office, typed up my notes from the building visit, and had dinner. Fritz's ragout of veal, which would have made a Michelin inspector weep with gratitude, at the small table in the corner, while Wolfe ate at his desk and refused to discuss the case during food, which is one of his inviolable principles. At 7:30, with the dinner things cleared and the first beer of the evening open, I gave him my report. The overnight building attendant's name was Roy Timmins, and he'd been at the building for 9 years. I found him at a diner on 2nd Avenue, where he'd gone after his shift, and he gave me 40 minutes over coffee. He was a round-faced man of about 55, with the watchful, patient manner of someone who has spent years observing human behavior in building lobbies, and has formed conclusions he keeps to himself. The lobby of the building on East 53rd is a standard midtown layout: a central reception desk, elevator bank to the left, a seating area with 2 chairs and a small table to the right, and a corridor leading to the freight elevator and building management offices at the back. The security desk is positioned facing the main entrance doors, giving a clear view of anyone who comes in from the street. What Timmins had confirmed to the police, and now confirmed to me, was that Marcus Caro arrived at 6:14, stood at the desk to inquire about Hale, was told Hale hadn't come in yet, and waited in the seating area to the right. He left at 6:37. What Timmins had not been asked about directly, and what I asked about now, was whether he'd left the desk at any point during Caro's time in the lobby. He had. At 6:21, he'd gone to the back corridor to check a maintenance alert on the freight elevator system, a standard automated signal that required a manual reset. He was gone approximately 8 minutes. During those 8 minutes, Marcus Caro was in the lobby alone, with unsupervised access to both elevators. I presented this to Wolfe, who listened without expression. "Which elevator bank," he asked, "is visible from the seating area?" "Both, more or less, but Timmins was gone for 8 minutes. If Caro had moved quickly—" "If he'd moved quickly," Wolfe said, "he could have gone up, been in the office for 5 minutes at most, and returned before Timmins came back. Is that sufficient time to kill a man, wipe a weapon, deposit it in a hallway receptacle, and return?" I thought about the geometry of the 14th floor as I'd walked it this afternoon. Barely, very barely, he'd have had to know the layout perfectly and moved without hesitation. And the camera. The elevator bank camera shows the call buttons being pressed at... I checked my notes. The police log shows no elevator activity during the window Timmins was away. Wolfe was quiet. "Which means," I said, "either Caro didn't use the elevator, The camera malfunctioned, or the camera records were altered, Wolfe said. Or the relevant recording has been selectively interpreted. I haven't seen the footage directly. Only the police summary. Obtain the footage. Still working on it. He set down his beer. The unknown figure who entered at 5 to 5:20. Yes. That figure has an alibi of a different kind. They arrived, and presumably, departed before Marcus Caro. If Hale was killed between 5 and 5:20, the unidentified figure is the more natural candidate. If Hale was killed after 6:14, then Caro becomes the candidate. The medical examiner's window is 5 to 7. That is 2 hours. The precision of that estimate matters enormously. He looked at me. Get the full medical examiner's report, not the summary. My sergeant again. Use whatever resources are necessary. The next morning, Conrad Yates arrived at 9 o'clock, wearing a dark suit, a careful expression, and the self-possession of a man walking into a meeting he's already run in his head and decided he can manage. He was wrong, but he didn't know that yet. Yates was 54, trim, with hair going silver at the temples, and the kind of precise, unremarkable features that look like they were designed for discretion. He sat in the client's chair, declined coffee, and gave Wolfe a nod of professional acknowledgement, as if they were about to discuss a business proposition. Mr. Yates, Wolfe said, thank you for coming. I'll be direct. You have been the operations director of Hale Capital Partners for 7 years. In that capacity, you have full knowledge of the firm's administrative and accounting structures. You are, in my estimation, the person most likely to know the precise mechanics of whatever fraudulent scheme was operating within the firm. And therefore, you are the person most likely to know who, beyond the clients, had sufficient grievance with Desmond Hale to kill him. Yates's expression didn't change, except around the eyes, where something went very still. I'm not sure what you're implying, he said. I'm not implying anything, Wolfe said. I am stating. The firm has been systematically removing money from client accounts through fictitious fee structures over a period of at least 3 years. You are aware of this. You may have designed it, participated in it, known about it, or some gradation of those positions. I am not, at present, interested in your precise culpability in the fraud. I am interested in who killed Desmond Hale. I want to speak with my attorney before. You are not required to speak with me at all, Wolfe said pleasantly. You may leave at any time. However, if you leave without giving me information that helps me identify the murderer, the alternative is that the police investigation continues on its current trajectory, which points at Marcus Caro. If Marcus Caro is ultimately charged, and the full scope of the fraud becomes public in the course of that trial, as it certainly will, your role in it will be examined very carefully in a very public forum. He paused. Whereas if you assist me now, and the actual murderer is identified, the fraud investigation will proceed on its own track, giving you an opportunity to negotiate your position from a posture of limited cooperation rather than belated necessity. Yates looked at Wolfe for a long moment. Then he looked at me, perhaps hoping I'd offer something different. I didn't. What do you want to know? He said. The unidentified figure on the building camera, I said. Someone entered the building between 5 and 5:20 Monday morning. The footage isn't clear enough for identification. Who has building access outside of staff? A pause. Careful, but not quite careful enough. I could see him deciding something. Hale gave access codes to 4 clients, Yates said. Major investors. He liked the gesture. It made them feel like insiders. Names. He gave us 3 names I didn't know and 1 I did. Renata Voss. I kept my face neutral and wrote it down. Did Hale have any other relationships outside the firm that might have created enemies beyond the client base? Wolfe asked. Yates folded his hands on his knee. He was a man of considerable appetites, he said carefully. Be specific. Another careful pause. There was a woman, not his wife, a woman named Caroline Marsh. They'd been involved for approximately 2 years. She also has money in the firm, approximately $400,000. Also affected by the fraud? Yes, though she may not have known it. Did she know about the relationship? By which I mean, did she know she was not the only arrangement of this kind in Hale's life? Yates looked uncomfortable for the first time. Not with the question, I thought, but with where it led. There were two other women, at different points. Caroline was the current one. She thought she was. He stopped. Special, Wolfe supplied, with the tone of a man reading from a dictionary. Yes, and she was not. There was another woman before her, a woman named Diane Pelletier. That relationship ended approximately 8 months ago. It ended badly. I wrote. The room was getting very full of names. Was Diane Pelletier also a client? She was. A small account. She withdrew her assets from the firm 6 months ago. And the nature of the bad ending? Wolfe asked. Yates looked at the ceiling briefly. There were communications. Threatening in character. Hale had his attorney send a cease and desist letter. Do you know if she received it and complied? I know she received it. Whether she complied, he hesitated again. Hale mentioned, approximately a month ago, that he'd seen her outside the building. He didn't say she threatened him. He said she looked at him. How did he look when he said that? I asked. Yates turned to me, unsettled. After Yates left, I looked at my notes and then at Wolfe. The whiteboard behind my desk, which had started the morning with 7 names, needed expanding. We now have, I said, at least 4 people with building access and motive. Marcus Caro, Gerald Fenn if he's lying about his alibi, Renata Voss, who apparently has a key to the building and didn't mention it, and a woman named Diane Pelletier, who may or may not have received a cease and desist, and may or may not have been standing outside the building recently, looking at the man who threw her over. Yes, Wolfe said, plus a fraud affecting 60 clients, any number of whom might have known enough to act. Also yes. And a wife who may or may not have known her husband had 2 ongoing affairs and was stealing from his clients. Archie. Yes. Find Diane Pelletier. Diane Pelletier lived on West 86th Street in a building that managed to be respectable without being comfortable. The kind of address that says, I belong in Manhattan, without saying anything else. The doorman called up, announced me, received permission, and sent me to the 7th floor with the look of a man who has learned not to ask questions. She answered the door herself. She was 44, with the particular attractiveness of a woman who has stopped trying to manage it, and arrived, on the other side, at something more interesting. A fine-boned face, dark eyes that took my measure without apparent effort. Hair pulled back simply. She wore slacks and a cream-colored sweater, and carried a cup of tea. Mr. Goodwin, she said, without warmth or hostility. Come in. The apartment was well furnished in the way of someone who has good taste and uses it quietly. Books, some art that looked original and not decorative. Good rugs. She sat in an armchair and indicated the sofa. I sat. You're working for the Caros, she said. I'm working for Nero Wolfe, who's been retained by Vivian Caro, yes. I took out my notebook. I'd like to talk to you about Desmond Hale. I assumed so. She sipped her tea. I've already spoken to the police. I know. I'd like to hear it myself. I paused. Miss Pelletier, I want to be straightforward with you. I know about your relationship with Hale, and its ending. I know about the cease and desist letter. I know Hale told someone he'd seen you outside his building recently. I'm not interested in your private life. I'm interested in who killed him. She looked at me over her cup. And you want to know if it was me? Honestly, yes. She set down the cup. I didn't kill Desmond Hale. I won't pretend to be destroyed by his death. He was a man who took things from people, money, time, affection, and gave back very precisely what served him. When I became inconvenient, he discarded me. She said it with the flatness of a woman who has processed something thoroughly. What I felt when I heard he was dead was mostly relief. Where were you Monday morning, 5 to 7 a.m.? Here, asleep. I live alone. She anticipated the follow-up. No, I can't verify it. My neighbor across the hall might have heard me moving around in the morning, but I can't guarantee it. I usually get up at 7:30. Why were you outside Hale's building? A pause, brief but present. He owed me money. From the investment account? No. Personal money. I lent him $30,000 14 months ago, before I understood what kind of man he was. When I withdrew my account from the firm, I also asked for the personal loan to be repaid. He refused. Said there was nothing in writing, and he couldn't imagine what I was referring to. She said it with perfect evenness. I went to his building, because I wanted him to see me, to know I hadn't forgotten. It was foolish, probably. Probably, I agreed. Did you go inside the building? No. I stood across the street. Twice. Do you have building access? A key card? She shook her head. I was never given one. I wrote all of it down. Did Hale ever mention other clients who were unhappy? Anyone who threatened him beyond the official channels? She thought about it. He mentioned once, a man who'd been emphatic, was how he put it, about some money he felt he was owed. He didn't give me a name. This was maybe 6 weeks ago. What did he say about this man? He said some people can't accept that risk is inherent in investment. He said it with the confidence of someone who is lying about why they're nervous. I asked a few more questions, got a few more answers that were probably true and might be useful, and left her with a card and a request to call if anything occurred to her. On the street, I checked my notebook and added a line. No building access, no physical alibi, knows about financial fraud firsthand, didn't know the personal loan story until today. Who else did Hale borrow from? I spent the afternoon on 2 more interviews. The first was with Patricia Hale, the widow at the townhouse on East 68th. She received me in a sitting room that had been recently tidied with the mechanical thoroughness of grief, every surface precise and a little empty. She was exactly as described, composed, conventional, with a manner of careful calibration that told me she was managing her situation rather than feeling it. Probably that would come later. She confirmed that her husband had no unusual behavior in the weeks before his death. She confirmed that she'd have been at home Sunday night and Monday morning. She had, she said, been awakened by the police at 8:30. She described the sequence of events in the precise, slightly recursive way of someone who has already told a story too many times and is listening to themselves tell it. Mrs. Hale, I said toward the end, were you aware of any difficulties in the firm? Clients who were unhappy? Desmond never discussed business with me, she said. That was a boundary he maintained consistently. Were you aware of any personal difficulties? Anyone who might have wanted to hurt him? She looked at me steadily. Mr. Goodwin, I'm aware that my husband was not universally liked. Successful people rarely are. She paused. I was his wife, not his confessor. Which was, I thought, walking back to the street, either a straightforward statement of a limited marriage or the most elegant non-answer I'd heard all week. The second afternoon interview was Renata Voss, unannounced, by phone. You have building access, I said. A brief silence. Conrad Yates told you. Does it matter how I know? I suppose not. She exhaled, audibly. Yes, I have a key card. Hale gave it to me 2 years ago, when our relationship was different, when I still trusted him. Did you use it Monday morning? A longer silence. Mr. Goodwin, it's a simple question. Nothing about this is simple. Another exhale. No, I did not go to the building Monday morning. I was at home. I have a dog. The dog can verify it if dogs give statements. The building camera. I know about the camera. I've seen enough crime coverage to know it doesn't show me, because I wasn't there. You understand how this looks. I understand how everything looks, she said sharply. It looks like a man I trusted stole my money, and now he's dead, and I have a key card, and so I become a suspect. Yes, I understand how it looks. That's why I didn't mention the key card. It was stupid. I know it was stupid. I thought about the figure on the camera. Hat, collar up, indeterminate. Renata Voss was 58, with silver hair and a distinctive bearing. A hat and a turned-up collar would cover most of it. What kind of dog? I asked. What? The dog. What kind? A beagle. His name is Ptolemy. She said it with the defiant affection of someone very fond of a thing they know sounds ridiculous. Does Ptolemy have a usual morning walk time? A pause. I take him out at 6, every morning. My neighbor sees me sometimes. She has a retriever. We often cross in the lobby. Give me the neighbor's name. She gave it to me. I called the neighbor from the street. The neighbor confirmed the 6 a.m. lobby crossing on Monday, without hesitation and without prompting. Renata Voss had an alibi. I rode the subway back to West 35th with my notebook on my knee and made a list of what I knew and what I didn't, which is an exercise Wolfe considers sentimental and I consider essential. The list of what I didn't know was still considerably longer. But one item on the what I know side had begun to glow with a particular quality I'd learned, over years with Wolfe, to pay attention to. Someone had been in the building between 5 and 5:20. That someone was not Marcus Caro, not Renata Voss, not Diane Pelletier, who had no access, not Sylvia Rand, with her camera-verified departure time. I thought about Yates's careful face, and the regulated precision of his answers, and the one thing he'd told us about Diane Pelletier, that Hale had looked unsettled when he mentioned seeing her. I thought about the cease and desist letter. Who sends a cease and desist letter through an attorney rather than calling the police when someone is threatening them? Someone who wants to keep what the threatening person knows from becoming public. I arrived at West 35th, let myself in, hung up my coat, and found Wolfe in the office with a book and a beer, apparently serene. I have a question, I said. You have several, he said, without looking up. You're going to tell me which one is actually the right one. I sat down. What did Desmond Hale need to keep Diane Pelletier quiet about? Because it wasn't the affair. Affairs come out all the time, especially when the man involved is dead and the fraud is coming to light anyway. What was so important that he needed a legal document to suppress it? Wolfe set down his book and looked at me with the expression, rare and worth cataloging when it appears, of genuine satisfaction. Now, he said, we are asking the correct question. There are days in this business when everything you learn generates 2 more questions, and the pyramid of unknowns gets taller while the pyramid of knowns sits stubbornly at the base. Then there are the other days, fewer but more valuable, when the right question, asked at the right moment, acts like a key in a complicated lock, and the tumblers start to fall. The next morning was one of the second kind. Wolfe spent the evening, or at least the part of it from dinner to the point when I stopped being consulted, turning over what I'd brought back. He said very little, which is either a sign that he's found the shape of something and is mapping its edges, or a sign that he's retreating into a Romanian novel and has decided the case can wait. I've learned after 12 years that the two are not mutually exclusive. At 7:45 in the morning, before orchids, before Fritz's extraordinary pain au chocolat had even arrived at the table, Wolfe spoke to me from the hallway. The cease and desist letter, he said. Find out who Hale's attorney was. Get the letter if you can. An attorney named Roland Fitch, who occupied a suite of offices on Lexington Avenue and specialized in what he called private client dispute resolution, which is the kind of language that means it costs a lot and stays quiet. I got his name from Yates in a 5-minute phone call that Yates appeared to welcome as an opportunity to be cooperative about something minor while avoiding something major. Fitch wouldn't show me the letter, but he confirmed, with the careful vagueness of someone protecting privilege while actually communicating something, that the cease and desist had concerned personal and financial matters of a confidential nature, and that the specific concern was potential disclosure of proprietary information. Proprietary information about a private investment firm. I went to see Sylvia Rand again. We met for coffee near her apartment in Brooklyn Heights, at a place with small tables and good pastries, and the ambient noise level that encourages frank conversation. She'd been home since Hale's murder, she told me, on what the firm was calling personal leave while the police investigation continued. When you found the discrepancy, I said, setting down my cup, the unknown account code, you said it was a percentage of client portfolio values. Yes. Was it a single account? One destination? No. Multiple. I could identify 3 distinct account codes that were receiving transfers from client accounts. But the transfers were routed. They didn't go directly. They moved through intermediary accounts first. She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. I'm not an accountant. I'm an investment advisor. I spotted the pattern, but I couldn't trace the full route. Could someone else trace it, with the right access? Conrad Yates could, or someone with forensic accounting expertise. When this comes fully to light, and it will, what do you think those accounts will show? She looked at me steadily. I think they'll show that the money left the firm in one direction and arrived somewhere else. The question is whether that somewhere else belonged to Hale alone, or to Hale and someone else. Did Hale strike you as the kind of man who partners in things? She thought about it seriously. Desmond Hale struck me as the kind of man who controlled everything and trusted no one. Which means, whatever structure he built it so that if it fell apart, he had what he needed to walk away. She paused. But the account codes I found were too sophisticated for one person to design and maintain alone. They were very specific. They used the firm's internal logic, but against the firm. That requires deep knowledge of the back-end systems. Which Yates has, she confirmed. I went back to the brownstone and gave Wolfe a summary. He heard it with his eyes half closed and both hands flat on the desk. Tell me, he said when I finished, about Yates's background, before Hale Capital. I looked him up after our meeting yesterday. He was operations director at a smaller firm, Meridian Financial Group, for 5 years. Left following a regulatory inquiry, which was resolved without formal sanctions. Before that, 8 years at a larger institutional firm. The regulatory inquiry at Meridian was about account reconciliation irregularities. Wolfe opened his eyes fully. For Wolfe, this is the equivalent of sitting up sharply. He's done this before, I said. Perhaps. Or he has experience in the architecture of the kind of scheme we're looking at, which someone might pay very well for. He leaned back in his chair. Yates designs systems. He may or may not profit from them directly. He may sell the design. Who does he sell it to? Desmond Hale hired him 7 years ago, specifically knowing about the Meridian situation. That is not the behavior of a man who values clean operations. That is the behavior of a man who wants to buy expertise. And the expertise, I said slowly, comes with the expectation of loyalty, which is a fragile commodity. Precisely. Wolfe tapped the desk once. What does Yates know that could end him? He knows the full mechanics of the fraud. He probably knows every account, every routing, every number. Yes, and what does that mean for anyone who wanted Hale dead without wanting the fraud uncovered? It means you need Yates either on your side or silenced. I stopped. Or you need the fraud to come out, which ends Yates's vulnerability as leverage. Wolfe was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "The unknown figure on the camera. We have established who it is not. Let us consider who would have reason to be in that building at 5 a.m, who has or can obtain building access, and who is, in my assessment, the single most constrained actor in this entire affair." I ran through it. Marcus Caro, independently motivated. Renata Voss, alibied. Diane Pelletier, no access. Patricia Hale, no evident motive yet. I stopped. Patricia Hale, I said. Wolfe said nothing, which is a form of confirmation. She knew, I said, working through it. She said Hale never discussed business with her. But she's been married to the man for 16 years. You don't live with someone for 16 years and not know the shape of their anxiety. She knew, not the details, but the direction. And, Wolfe said, she is the primary beneficiary of his estate, which is about to be considerably complicated by the fraud revelations and the potential clawback claims from 60 clients. Yes, unless her husband is dead, the firm is wound down in the chaos of a murder investigation, and the estate is settled before the full regulatory accounting is complete. He paused. Consider also this, a woman who knew about the affairs, and a wife of 16 years, in a marriage you described as appearing fine from the outside, almost certainly knew, and who had to watch her husband spend their marriage's resources, emotional and financial, on a series of other women. The $30,000 loan to Diane Pelletier, I said. If Hale lent money to a mistress, it came from somewhere. The marital estate, Wolfe said, quite possibly without Patricia Hale's knowledge, until she found it. I thought about the sitting room on East 68th, the mechanical tidiness of it, the composed face above the careful words. I was his wife, not his confessor. She'd need building access, I said. Hale maintained the building access codes for the firm. The codes are managed digitally. A wife with access to her husband's records at home could have found one. I picked up my phone. I need to find out if any guest or client codes were used to enter the building Monday morning. Yes, Wolfe said. And Archie. Yes? If Patricia Hale killed her husband, she did so for layered reasons. The fraud about to destroy her estate, the affairs, the accumulated weight of 16 years, and she did so having planned it with some care. She is not a frightened amateur. She is a woman who has spent 16 years managing surfaces. He paused. And bring her here tomorrow. On what pretext? He looked at me with mild surprise. Tell her the truth. I have assembled considerable information about her husband's murder, and would like to discuss it with her. If she is innocent, she'll come to protect herself from suspicion. If she is guilty, she'll come to manage what I know. He picked up his book. Either way, she'll come. She came at 11 o'clock the next morning, arriving in a black car with the punctuality of someone who understands that punctuality is its own form of statement. She wore charcoal and gray, appropriate to widowhood, and carried herself with the stillness of a woman who has rehearsed this morning many times in her head. I showed her in. She looked at Wolfe with the same steady, calibrating attention she'd given me at the townhouse, and sat down without being asked. Mr. Wolfe, she said, you wanted to see me? I did, Wolfe said. Thank you for coming, Mrs. Hale. I'll explain the situation plainly. I have been retained to identify the person who killed your husband. The investigation has proceeded to the point where I believe I have a satisfactory account of what happened. The who, the how, and the why. Before I take that account to Inspector Kramer of the New York Police Department, I extend the courtesy of a conversation to the principal parties. It is a courtesy, not an obligation, and you are, of course, free to leave. Patricia Hale folded her hands in her lap. She had, I noticed, very still hands. I understand, she said. On Sunday night, the night before your husband's body was found, were you at home on East 68th? Yes. All night? Yes. When did you go to sleep? Around 10:30. And you did not leave the house until the police arrived at 8:30 Monday morning. A pause. That's correct. Mrs. Hale, he said, this is the moment when I am going to tell you what I know, and you are going to have an opportunity to amend your account if there are elements of it that are inaccurate. This is the last moment when amendment serves you better than insistence. Her hands stayed folded. Her face stayed composed. I have nothing to amend. Very well. You are aware that your husband maintained building access codes for Hale Capital Partners, specifically codes issued to favored clients. Among your husband's personal documents at home, which you will have had access to in the days since his death, there would be a record of those codes. I believe you found such a record, or found it previously, at some point in the last several months, when your awareness of the full scope of your husband's activities caused you to examine his personal files more carefully than you had before. She was very still. I don't know what you mean. Building records for East 53rd Street, I said, on cue, show that a guest access code, specifically the code issued to a client named Gerald Fenn, who did not use it Monday morning, as he was home with his wife, was used to enter the building at 5:03 a.m. on Monday. I paused. Gerald Fenn's code used by someone else, the kind of code that would be in a list in a home office. This was the moment. I'd seen it before. The moment when someone's face does the thing it's been refusing to do. When the performance of composure meets an unexpected fact, and the gap between them becomes visible. In Patricia Hale's case, it was brief and controlled. Just a small, involuntary tightening around the mouth and eyes. The biological admission of a thing the mind hasn't quite authorized. "I see," she said, after a moment, very quietly. "You knew about the fraud," Wolfe said, not unkindly. "You knew he was stealing from his clients. You found documents, perhaps you'd found them months ago. You knew the estate was going to be caught in a regulatory catastrophe, and that a significant portion of what you believed you had would be subject to recovery proceedings. And you knew about the women. Perhaps you have known for some time." She looked at her hands. "Desmond Hale," Wolfe continued, "was not merely your unfaithful husband. He was a man whose death, before the fraud was fully investigated, preserved something. The estate. The assets held personally rather than through the firm. The house, the weekend property, the accounts that were sufficiently removed from the firm's mechanics that they might survive the investigation." He paused. "I don't believe you planned this for very long. I believe you made a decision relatively recently, perhaps within the last 2 weeks, when the confrontation with Marcus Caro brought the situation to a head, and you understood that the investigation of the firm was now inevitable." She raised her eyes from her hands. Her face had done something, not collapsed, not broken, but arrived at a kind of honest stillness, the composure of someone who has stopped managing an impression and simply is. "The cease and desist letter," she said. "You know about it." "Yes. He used marital money to lend to her. I found the records 8 months ago. I found all of it 8 months ago." She said it with the quiet precision of a woman reading from the back of a very long bill. "The accounts he thought I didn't know about. The women, the clients he was stealing from, though I didn't understand the full mechanism until much later. He had files at home. He worked from home on weekends. I had time." She paused. "I didn't know what to do with it. I thought about leaving. I thought about reporting it. But to leave would mean lawyers and exposure and all of it coming out, and he would have made certain that whatever came out implicated me as much as possible." "Did he know you had found the files?" "No. I was very careful." She looked at Wolfe. I was not, an impulsive person." "No," Wolfe agreed. "You are not." "The code was in his desk," she said, after a moment, "in an address book he kept with access information. I wrote it down 3 weeks ago, when Marcus Caro confronted him, and I understood the situation was accelerating. I hadn't decided. I want to be clear. I hadn't decided." "But you went," I said. She looked at me. "I went," she said. "I told myself I was going to talk to him, before anyone arrived, to give him a chance to, I don't know, to explain it, to account for it." She was quiet for a moment. "He was at his desk when I arrived. He looked up, and he wasn't surprised, which was the thing that, he wasn't surprised. He knew you knew," Wolfe said. "He said, 'I expected you eventually,' just that." She stopped. We talked for a few minutes. He wasn't apologetic. He wasn't frightened. He explained with perfect calm that whatever I thought I knew, whatever I could prove, it would be his word against mine, and he had 17 lawyers, and I had nothing. She paused. The bookend was on the desk. I'd noticed it before, a gift years ago, from a client. Green marble. She stopped again. "I'm not sure I made a decision. I'm not sure decision is the right word." Wolfe said nothing. "I left," she said. "I wiped it, the way people wipe things in films. And I thought, that's absurd. I'm not this person. And then I took the elevator down and walked home and sat in my kitchen until the phone rang." The office held the particular silence it develops in its most serious moments. The brownstone's old bones quiet, the street noise muffled by good walls, the weight of a confession making its own kind of space. I looked at my notebook. I'd been writing through all of it, automatically, the habit overriding everything else. "Mrs. Hale," Wolfe said, I am going to ask you to remain here for 1 hour, while I make a telephone call to Inspector Kramer. I suggest you use that hour to call your attorney. He paused. I am sorry. She looked at him. Something moved through her eyes. Not gratitude, not hostility, something more complicated than either. Are you? She asked. Does it affect you? Wolfe considered it with the seriousness it deserved. It does not change what must be done, he said. But yes, it affects me. She reached into her bag for her phone and began to make a call. Nero Wolfe called Inspector Kramer of the NYPD's Homicide Division at 12:15, with Patricia Hale still in the client's chair and an attorney named Suzanne Mott, who arrived in 28 minutes and was as good as a 2-minute phone call could get, sitting beside her. I was in the hall when Wolfe made the call, not because the conversation was private, but because there are moments in this business that need a slight margin, a few feet of corridor and a closed door, and both Wolfe and I understand this without discussing it. He was on the phone for 11 minutes. I know because I timed it by the grandfather clock in the hall, which Wolfe's father brought from Montenegro and which has not lost 30 seconds in 30 years. Kramer arrived at 1:15 with a sergeant and a woman from the DA's office, whom I didn't know. Patricia Hale was taken in a car at 1:47. She was composed getting in. Her attorney was in a separate car. The process was unhurried, which I appreciated. Afterward, Kramer stood in the doorway of the office with his hat in his hands. He always holds his hat in his hands in this room, as though the room requires it, and looked at Wolfe with the expression he reserves for moments when he has been saved from a mistake he hasn't fully made yet, and is deciding how to feel about that. Marcus Caro, he said. We were going to move on him this afternoon. I know, Wolfe said. She was there when he arrived. She was already gone. Yes. The medical examiner's window of 5 to 7 was too generous. The actual time of death, based on the progression of rigor and the specific temperature of the body at discovery. Details I obtained through a colleague's consultation with a forensic pathologist, was almost certainly before 5:45. Caro arrived at 6:14. The medical examiner's imprecision was going to cost an innocent man his freedom. Kramer looked at him, the forensic pathologist. A professional courtesy, Wolfe said blandly. The access code. Used at 5:03. The firm's building records log all access events with timestamps. Your investigators had this information. The significance of Gerald Fenn's code being used without Gerald Fenn's presence was apparently not flagged. Wolfe's voice was not entirely free of dryness. The building management company can confirm it now. Kramer put on his hat. Fine, he said, which from Kramer is an elaborate compliment. Send Goodwin downtown later to give a statement. He'll be there by 4, I said. He left. The brownstone settled back into its usual quiet. I leaned in the doorway of the office and looked at Wolfe, who had recovered his book with the speed of a man who has been waiting for an excuse. Well, I said, Marcus Caro is free. He was always free. The constraint was evidentiary, not actual. Vivian Caro will want to hear from us. Call her. The other business? The fraud. 60 clients. That, Wolfe said, is the province of regulators, attorneys, and courts. I am a detective, not a receiver in bankruptcy. I expect Mr. Yates will have an interesting few months. You think he was in it with Hale? I think he designed the mechanism and was compensated for it, and is significantly implicated. Whether he is prosecuted depends on what he trades for cooperation. It is not my concern. He turned a page. My concern is concluded. I sat down at my desk and looked at my notes. The whiteboard behind me had 11 names on it, and a great many arrows. I thought about Patricia Hale, sitting in her tidied sitting room, having carried the weight of 8 months of knowledge, the money, the women, the accumulated record of a marriage that had been, for a very long time, a performance of one kind or another, and making a decision in a corner office on the 14th floor that she probably began making long before she ever wrote down an access code. I thought about the marble bookend, green apparently, A gift from a client. Wolfe, I said. Did you know it was her before she came in? He looked up. I believed it was her before she came in. There is a distinction. What would you have done if she'd held firm? Denied the access code, denied everything. He considered this with genuine attention. I would have presented the evidence to Kramer and allowed the investigation to proceed. The access code record would have been found eventually. Her timeline would have been examined. The forensic pathologist's revised estimate would have narrowed the window in ways that excluded Caro conclusively. He paused. The advantage of the conversation this morning was speed, and I hope, a degree of dignity. She appreciated the, "I'm sorry," I said. I think. She asked if it was real, he said. It was. He went back to his book. Fritz appeared at the door to announce that lunch was ready. Cold poached salmon with a green sauce, and Wolfe's particular weakness, an exceptional potato salad prepared the night before to achieve the precise temperature and texture that Fritz understood, and no one else has ever managed to replicate. We ate. Wolfe was 4 glasses of wine and a small triumph ahead of the afternoon, and appeared, within the limits of his normal expression, content. I called Vivienne Caro after lunch. She received the news with the silence of a person who has been braced for a difficult thing for so long, and its resolution registers first as absence. My brother is clear, she said. Completely. And the woman who? Patricia Hale, she's in custody. A longer pause. I don't know. I don't know exactly what I expected. Most people don't, I said. When it's over, I mean, you expect resolution to feel like something arrives, and mostly it just feels like something leaves. She was quiet for a moment. Thank you, Mr. Goodwin, and thank Mr. Wolfe. I relayed this. Wolfe said, she is welcome, without looking up. I checked the time. 3:45. I'd need to leave for downtown in 15 minutes to give Kramer's office my statement. I used the time to clean up my notes, update the whiteboard, and make one last pass through the arithmetic of the week. 6 days from client to resolution. 1 murder, 11 named persons of interest, 1 confession. Marcus Caro, who had gone to a building at dawn in the desperation of a man who'd lost hundreds of thousands of dollars, and who had been, through the pure unlucky coincidence of his presence in a lobby, almost destroyed by it. Vivienne Caro, who had walked through the door in a red coat and written a check, and been, as it turned out, right about her brother. Desmond Hale, who had taken things from people and rearranged them to his advantage for long enough that he'd ceased, apparently, to expect consequences. Patricia Hale, who had found the files 8 months ago and done the terrible mathematics of it, quietly and alone, in a townhouse on East 68th Street. And Nero Wolfe, who had sat in his chair and read his books and drunk his beer and listened, which is the thing he does better than anyone I have ever met, and had arrived, through logic, elimination, and the careful attention to the one question that the situation was actually asking, at the truth. I put on my coat. Kramer's office, I said. Said Wolfe. He was deep in the Romanian novel, apparently back on whatever planet it takes him to. Don't stay downtown. Fritz is making Wiener Schnitzel. I paused at the door. Outside, the November evening was settling over West 35th Street with the efficient disinterest of a New York winter, cold, early, and entirely indifferent to the private business of brownstones. Wolfe, I said. He looked up. Nice work, I said. He looked at me for a moment with the expression he wears when something is closer to a feeling than he usually permits. And you, he said, go give your statement. Be precise. I went. The Wiener Schnitzel, I should say for the record, was extraordinary. End of The Scarlet Alibi.